Welcome once again, and I'm glad to be back and to be presenting this. We are looking at the messages to Laodicea, and we are looking at the book by Joe Cruz, the three books, that is the Creeping Compromise, the Enemy at the Gate, and the Reaping of the Whirlwind. But we are still on the Creeping Compromise, looking at this issue of lowering the Christian standards. And so I want to welcome all of you wherever that the Lord has enabled you to be and be part of this presentation. And those who will come in touch with these materials, I say that may the Lord bless us, and may we continue upholding the Christian integrity. At the end of the day, we may not give an excuse of the faith that we have in Jesus Christ. And so, welcome to another presentation. And in this part 3, I'm going to look at double standard exposed. And I believe that our Lord is going to help us to be able to understand what we have to speak about. And so, the standards of the church continues to be eroded. The standards of the church continues to be eroded, and many people are afraid to say anything concerning these standards. But may the Lord help us today to be true and to stand for the truth that God has given unto us and the liberty He has called us to be in, seeing that He is the only one that can heal Laodicea if it accepts its sins and its iniquities. I am sure that the Lord will want to heal us. The Lord will want to do everything to make sure that we are ready for the second coming of Jesus Christ. But this can only happen to us if we accept our true condition and apply the balm that the Lord has given unto us. Joe Cruz continues to tell us in his book about double standard exposed. He says, no discussion of modest will be complete without touching on the touchy subject of mixed swimming. Only in this area is the miniskirt almost modest by comparison. Here, by the way, we also discover the blind spot in Adventist dress standards. For some strange reason, very little has been said or written on this glaring inconsistency in dealing with our young people. While we take only a soft roll book type of standard on miniskirts, we have taken no official stand at all on the matter of mixed swimming. And even the unofficial views of most of the ministry and members do not seem to bear any consistent correlation with the historic principle we have espoused as a church. And so there are principles to be held by the church that should be a standard principle that should go across all the churches. He says, although swimming is one of the finest kinds of recreational activity, the modern bathing suit covers much less of the body than the skimpiest micro miniskirt. In truth, very little is left to the imagination. If we condemn the miniskirt, if we endorse any kind of modest dress principle, no matter how vague, how could we by any stretch of the imagination condone a bathing suit as acceptable Christian apparel? Surely no one is so blind as to miss this point. Our young people are not blind, and this is one of the reasons they seem not to listen anymore when we talk to them about modesty. They see the double standard that is being practiced. It is common practice in our academics to include admonitions in our handbook about modest dress. After that, there may be much or little said about the lengths of dresses, including low necks, bare backs, and sleevelessness. But in practically all our schools, sometimes during the year, the students and teachers go out to some waterfront location and spend the day playing together in less clothing than is worn by prostitutes who walk the city streets. In fact, if those students and teachers should walk down the main street of any small town wearing their bathing suits, they would be refused admission to most business places. They would scandalize even the unconverted community and risk possible arrest for indecent exposure. And yet we have blindly accepted this kind of dress as suitable for Seventh-day Adventist Christians to wear in mixed company. It is ironic that what the world calls indecent in one location, the church would call modest at another location. Does this make any kind of sense? The place has nothing to do with it, it is the principle. The principle against exposing the body applies on the street, the beach, or in the shopping center. If you want a shocking example of how this creeping compromise has reduced us to the level of the world around us, take a census of the most popular public beaches in July and August. Thousands of Seventh-day Adventists will be mingling with the vulgar multitude. And by the way, you will find no way to identify them from the half-clothed atheists, harlots, and thieves who frequent those resorts. All the flesh looks the same. Does the ocean-front location make it modest to shed our clothes? Do we believe that principles of modesty should be applied only at certain times and places? Are male responses to female nudity somehow thrown out of gear during the beach parties and swimming socials? I have found many of our members who have asked themselves the same questions. But because no one else seemed to be questioning the activity, they went along without saying anything. The general feeling seemed to be that the end probably justifies the means. In this case, they are getting fine exercise and having a good time. Others have rationalized that because everyone is in the same state of undress, no one is allowing a big bad thought to come into the head. Also, they get so accustomed to seeing one another half naked that they no longer respond to it. These arguments are not only shallow, but they are untrue. If they were true, then we would have a great case for joining the nudist colony. My convictions against mixed swimming grew in me as I observed the fruits of the practice. As a young intern minister in Florida, my assignment in one beachside city was to chaperone the youth at their swimming party. I was astounded to see how inhibitions were lowered by the promiscuous mingling of boys and girls in their bathing suits. Physical liberties were taken, and undue familiarities appeared during the games, which were played both in and out of the water. I shall never forget one thing I saw that day. It shocked me into taking my first stand against mixed swimming. One of the lady chaperons climbed up on the shoulders of one of the men who was also helping to supervise the activities. She was one of the spiritual leaders in the church, and he was a deacon. Her modesty on Sabbath morning was always exemplary. If a breeze should have lifted her skirt even slightly to expose a knee, she would have been embarrassed. Yet I watched in amazement as she sat astride the shoulders of a man who was not her husband and rode him around in the water, shrieking with laughter, clad in a scanty bathing suit. She seemed to have no sense whatsoever of the impropriety of what she was doing. Right then I decided that if this was the effect of mixed swimming, I'll have to take the position that it was wrong. During the 30 years since that day, I have seen nothing which has changed my feelings about it is evil influence. And so there you have what we call the creeping compromise, and Joe Cruz seeing how these things were so deleterious to our congregations. And the principles of modest dress does not only apply when you are at home or when we are at the church. God is everywhere, and temptations are everywhere. Temptations do not choose to be in church or in the home. And you will find that the very things, as they start really getting their inroads and being allowed, again you find that even in our large meetings, that is camp meetings, many have distorted views of what they should be wearing in public. Now, he goes ahead and gives another story. He goes ahead and gives another story A while ago, I was asked to present these principles of modest dress at camp meeting. After the meeting, which had occupied 2 hours in the main auditorium, 5 young people were waiting to talk to me. The 3 girls and 2 boys, all college age, were quite upset by what I had said. The beautiful girl who seemed to be speaking for all the others was especially vehement. She said, "How can you say mixed swimming is wrong? We have spent this whole summer with a witnessing team on the Ocean City beach. We spend most of the time in bathing suits, giving Bible studies to other young people on the boardwalk. And this is Tom, whom we met there, and he is to be baptized next Sabbath. How can you say we did wrong when you were able to win him for Christ on the beach?" I expressed joy for the young man who was to be baptized and commended them for leading him to Christ. Then I asked Tom this question: "Tom, in your association with these girls on the beach in their bathing suits, did you ever find evil or impure thoughts coming into your mind because of the way they were dressed?" Tom dropped his head for just a moment and then answered, "Yes, of course I did." Immediately, the girls chorused their dismay. "Why didn't you tell us then?" one of them asked. They seemed genuinely surprised that the boys had not come up to them at the beach to tell them their suits were provocative. They went away that day, wise young women, but do you think they forthwith gave up their custom of mixed bathing? I have found that in most cases, the ladies do not change their dress styles even after learning how detrimental their influence. The goddess of fashion is a tyrant ruler, and few are committed enough to yield their darling indulgences, especially when the attire caters for the self-nature. Dr. Harold Shyrock gives this counsel to young dating couples: avoid mixed swimming. Swimming of itself is a wholesome recreation, but when members of both sexes swim together, there is introduced an element of personal display which, for any normal human being, directs the thoughts toward the physical characteristics peculiar to the opposite sex. The effort of mixed swimming is to make commonplace those considerations that, for the Christians, are sacred. Mixed swimming tends to lower personal standards of decorum, making physical familiarity seem less objectionable. The Youth Instructor, July 1960. In the March 1971 issue of Ministry Magazine, a letter to the editor was printed which is worthy of wide distribution. The letter was written by Elder Don Howley, editor of Life and Health magazine, and he had this to say. In the January 1970 issue of the ministry, one of the ministers wrote concerning the matter of modesty. He pointed out that our criticism of the miniskirt did not seem to correlate with our complete lack of concern about mixed bathing. He, along with editors, asked that others express their opinion on the subject, but there has followed a strange silence. Is it possible that we know intuitively that mixed bathing is not proper, but since it is so universally practiced by the church, it seems best to ignore the situation? If so, this is a head in the sand approach. No matter how universal some impropriety may be, we still have to answer individually in the word, in the judgment. And so it is an alarming, sad fact that the convictions of many and their stand on these things are so silent that you wonder if nudity has become something which is to be accepted without say in anything. And we decry the wearing of the miniskirts, the bathing suits, and all that stuff, but it is not only the female who have a problem, but also the male wear shorts which reveal their bodies and are so tight that actually also it really exposes their masculinity, and this is also a temptation to young girls and women. And so not until we actually have a standard of what it means by modesty and where it should be practiced, every time we shall have really excuses for what the people do all the time. Some have asked whether E.G. White spoke on the subject of mixed bathing. According to the White Estate, there is no record of such a council, by the way. Obviously, the wearing of bikinis and skimpy bathing suits was not any problem under the Victorian era of the mid-1800s, but it has come as nothing normal amongst us that because E.G. White did not say anything, people do not see that this is immodest and this causes fornication and adultery. And so the question of mixed bathing, about which actually Joe Cruz complains about, somebody has said that you are not a prophet and you are not this and this, but the Bible standard of dress, we should be able, and by the way, we shouldn't be relying on E.G. White for standing for the information we have, but the Bible alone. And so there is another thing that we have entertained, and this is mixed games that we have. And in this mixed game, by the way, you will find people giving a lot of excuses about mixed sports, and you find that there is a lot of mingling between boys and girls, that that line of refinery is really eroded. And in this line of mixed sports and so on, you find that there is easy touching of each other and people get acquainted with each other. But one thing you have to know, that no man really just touches the body of a woman in an innocent way. We may say that no, that is not the issue. People hug and people do that. But far be it that these things can be taken as normal and not an appearance of evil. And so while it is true that many young people, especially the teenagers, consider us unrealistic in our approach to matters of this sort, that is not a new attitude. To find that the church members, even the young ones, really cringe and feel like they are shocked when you start talking about mixed swimming, mixed sport. And so as Christian parents and leaders, God has left it in our hands to teach our youth in such a way that while they may not fully agree with us at present, the time will come when they will see the wisdom of our cause. And so right now, many youths may not see what is being spoken as something that is of importance. And they will say that they are being shielded from socializing. But at the end of the day, when they grow old and they have their young girls who have started to grow breasts, and they have their young teenagers who are in their youthfulness, they'll see that these things are wrong. But when you tell them right now, this issue of commingling, this issue of not keeping distances between the two genders and the two sexes is something dangerous, and it causes unwarranted familiarity, they will say that you are a social misfit, or you are a social psychopath. You do not want the young people to mix. And so you will find that as we said earlier, that people will start saying that men have to deal with their weaknesses, with their moral weakness, that they have not been converted. But this is not the issue of conversion. We have seen that God created men and women with different sexual attraction. The way men are attracted to sex is not the way that women are attracted, and vice versa. And so we should face this creeping compromise that is coming in our churches with our heads high, maintaining Christian tone, maintaining the Christian love and the Christian attitude, but we should be so firm in what we are addressing. Otherwise, we shall find ourselves in a society where actually good is called evil and evil is called good. And so, as I was saying about this issue of commingling and sports, there comes another issue that Brother Joe Cruz was able also to address in Creeping Compromise, and we see it happening today, what we may call what? Unisex. Any discussion of dress today will be incomplete without some consideration being given to the topic of unisex. One of the phenomena of our times is the mushrooming growth of look-alike boutiques and hair salons. Unisex shops and signs are appearing all across the country, offering exactly the same clothes and hairdos to both men and women. What is the significance of this development? Are there any spiritual dangers inherent in this growing trend? First, we need to take note of the astronomical rise in homosexuality in the last few years. America has been literally swarmed in a blaze of newspaper and magazine stories about the gay movement and how it has proudly come out of the closet to demand its rights. Gay marches and demonstrations attract great crowds and wide publicity. Television forums have openly discussed the matter before millions of viewers, with both lesbians and homosexuals taking part. Psychiatry has given formal recognition to the practice as normal sex behavior. Great Protestant church organizations are not only opening the doors to membership, but are ordaining self-professed homosexuals to the ministry. Churches have been establishing exclusively for the worship of homosexuals, and some marriages have been performed and publicly registered between two persons of the same sex. And I don't need to hammer this home more than you can search YouTube and other channels to see that even our churches have been really affected with this Sodom and Gomorrah habit. Much has been written about the possible causes for this spectacular escalation of a very old perversion, tracing its roots back to Sodom and Gomorrah. Very few seem to understand exactly why it has made such a sudden resurgence, but we know that the Bible prophecy says, as it were in the days of Noah and Lot, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. We see things happening, we ask ourselves what is happening, but brothers and sisters, what is happening is that Christ is finishing his ministration in the heavenly sanctuary and coming to take his children home. And so, Adventist Bible students are acquainted with strong condemnation of sodomy, which is woven throughout both the Old and New Testament. God labeled it as one of the worst abominations, a sin which will utterly deprave and destroy. The ancient pagan world was riddled with the vice. The very name is derived from the city of Sodom, which harbored a host militant homosexuals. Paul also speaks the same things and issues in Romans 1:26 and 27. But we wonder, why are these things seemingly not getting the attraction of the people that they are wrong? It is because of what is called the unisex. Now we have the dresses called the unisex, we have hairdos called the unisex, we have places for the unisex, and it is like there is no differentiation between male and female. And even the sports nowadays, we have unisex sports. The land of Canaan, which the Israelites were to possess, was filled with the perverted iniquity of the sodomy and homosexuality. And this was one of the reasons God gave such explicit instruction for them not to intermarry or intermingle with the inhabitants of the land. They were to avoid any contaminating conduct which could lead Israel to join their debased practices. Furthermore, they were given specific instruction against dressing in a way that could create the climate for committing this sin. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. And because sodomy involves a changing of sex roles, which is usually accompanied by a pattern of acting and dressing like the opposite sex, God warned his people not to open any door of temptation on this matter. They were to maintain clear lines of distinction between the dress of men and the dress of women. The New Testament reaffirms this principle of separation in appearance. Paul had to say in 1 Corinthians 11, 14 and 15, doth not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame to him, but if a woman have long hair, it is glory to her. There is this differentiation of how a man or a woman should look. And Paul again talks about those people who practice effeminate. And what is effeminate? One opposite sex trying to look like the other sex, and these are the things that have really made the senses of the people die to the reality of the matter, that this world is coming to an end and it's straight away becoming Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, the women's liberal movement, whose declared purpose is to interchange roles of men and women in much of our social, economic, and religious life, has not seen a problem in this thing, but really advocate for the rights of the people who are in this state. And you hear even among the Seventh-day Adventists saying that, Paul in Romans chapter 1 doesn't speak about these things because he never knew the sexual orientation in such a time that we are living in. Do you think that the person who inspired Paul could not be able to reveal to him the sexual orientation for this century that we are living in? This is really burying our heads in the sand. And so, Dr. Charles Winnick, Dr. Charles Winnick, professor of sociology at the City University of New York, is one of the leading authorities who feels that the current vogue for interchangeable clothing is leading us to ultimate disaster. In his provocative book, The New People, he delineates the numerous ways that unisex is desexualizing the American people. He believes that even the over 30 group has been critically affected by the radical changes around them, although they don't fully realize how it is happening. And so, listen to what Dr. Winnick has to say. Dr. Winnick points out that even the staid businessmen are edging into patterned pastel-hued shirts and pants. Men's departments are doing a brisk business in jewelry, scented grooming aids, hair pieces, manicures, face creams, and cologne. Hairnets and permanent waves are discreetly labeled with terms like trainers and hair processing. In his book, Dr. Winnick catalogs several hundred pages of items in our culture that have become neutralized, bland, and consequently boring. For example, parents are giving more and more interchangeable names to their children, such as Kim, Chris, Leslie, Jean, Lee, and Dana. He believes that the blurring of masculine and feminine distinctions is leading our society into deep trouble because people cannot cope with critical life situations until they are certain of their sexual identity. No wonder so much in America you hear people saying that I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. I am a man trapped in I'm a man trapped in a woman's body, and I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. Such a foolish things that are being talked about, and you wonder why this is. And one of the reasons that Dr. Winnick gives for such a trend of things is even because we haven't been able to differentiate the name of the male and the name of the female. He believes that the blurring of masculine and feminine distinctions is leading our society into deep trouble because people cannot cope with critical life situations until they are certain of their sexual identity. Unisex clothing is confusing them and creating serious emotional crisis for many. Sociologist Winnick doesn't care how masculinity and femininity are defined as long as they are clearly defined. Just about every combination of male and female role relationships can be healthy and effective except one in which roles are blurred, he wrote in Medical Opinion and Review, a magazine for physicians. And so, with both Bible writers and social experts focusing on unisex clothing as a factor in creating sexual confusion, what should be our own personal attitude towards this spreading vogue? As members of the remnant church, we have not been left without guidance on the matter. E.G. White commented on the biblical position in these words. I was referred to Deuteronomy 22:5. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. There is an increasing tendency to have women in their dress and appearing as near like the other sex as possible, and to fashion their dress very much like of men, but God pronounced it what? Abomination. Testimonies to the Church, volume 1, page 457. And people may say that these are trivial matters, even to say that people taking upon names which are masculine and they are female is something that can cause confusion in our society. But it is true that those who have done researches, we are seeing that these things are becoming, are lessening the dignity that should be maintained between the two opposite genders. And so the issue for us is no longer whether the clothes are actual those of the opposite sex. They might be created for one sex only, but be fashioned like the opposite sex. Thus, the influence could be to push the bisexuals or fringe homosexuals over the line into the confirmed camp. And so now the question that is raised is, where should the line be drawn between male and female styles of clothing? There seems to be no disagreement about wearing the actual clothing of the opposite sex. It is clearly forbidden. There is apparently much disagreement about the degree of similarity which can exist without becoming an abomination. And so many are convinced that the typical pantsuit is already fashioned very much after that of men. But if it is not, how many small changes will it take to make it into the category of being so fashioned? At that point, Miss White said it will be an abomination. As the pantsuit collars widen and coat style shift to become more and more masculine, will it be possible to detect the point of transition from stylish to abomination? And so, many sincere Seventh-day Adventists believe that the spirit of prophecy condones the pantsuit fashion. The truth is that Miss White took the opposite position. She condemned it. The popular American costume of Miss White Day is described by her in these words: it consists of a vest, pants, and dress resembling a coat and reaching about halfway from the hip to the knee. This dress I have opposed from what has been shown me as not in harmony with the Word of God, and that is in Testimonies to the Church, volume 1, page 465. And so, in what respect does the dress differ from the modern pantsuit? She was describing almost exactly what we see being worn by the vast majority of women today, except that the dress coat is a bit shorter on today's version. And so, brothers and sisters, these creeping compromises are coming into the church, and people are talking about equality, but what we are seeing happening in the church is a corruption of morals and a hardening of heart to the promptings of the Spirit. The dress which was described as a vest, blouse, pants, and a dress resembling a coat and reaching about halfway from the hip to the knee was not acceptable because the dress did not reach to the knees. In other words, pants apparently were not objectionable if they were covered by a dress which came at least to the knees. But today you hear people saying that women can have their pants and go about them so long as the zips, I don't know, is on the left or what, then they can wear them without a dress covering it. This is an abomination. This is confusion. And this is what has led to more demoralization of standards in our churches. And so, as I try to bring this to an end, there is another aspect which we may talk about, and it's colorful cosmetics and jewelry. And I'd like just to read a few things from what he has to say on the issue of cosmetics. And remember, we are talking about Christian standards that are being lowered in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And these are being taken as normal, but we see that the church is drifting into looking like the world. Elder Joe Cruz goes ahead to say, one of the most frequent and mistaken complaints that people make against religion is that it is too restrictive. In this permissive age when all the emphasis seems to be upon doing your own thing, an unreasonable attitude of self-will have developed. This attitude has even intruded into religion. Church members and non-members seem to be in quest of the same thing, a religion which doesn't interfere with personal rights and freedom. Suspicion is aroused instantly against any doctrine which demands the giving up of anything. As this liberal spirit has grown stronger, many church members have turned more and more critical of the high spiritual standards upheld by the church. Obviously embarrassed by the widening gap between the church and the world and unwilling to meet the social stigma of being a peculiar minority, these members have sought to justify their compromise in the area of Christian standards. They often argue that the church is being narrow and legalistic and that many fine people are being discouraged from joining the church by this arbitrary imposition of rules. If these complaints are valid, then some basic changes surely need to be made in the doctrine of the church. If they are not valid, then we desperately need to know how to present the standards of Christian conduct in their true biblical what? Biblical setting. Continued on, he says, in contrast to the popular revolt against any absolute law of individual conduct, we must consider the Bible facts about the Christian life in general and morals in particular. How compatible are these modern demands for personal freedom with the standards of God's Word? Let us suppose that the true biblical position could be presented with all the love and persuasion of an angel from heaven. Would the truth be easy for anyone to accept? Let us face it, the path to eternal life is not a soft flower way of ease. Jesus laid such emphasis upon this in so many texts that we cannot be blind to it. He said, "Straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." Matthew 7:14. One of the very principles of being a Christian is self-denial. Christ said, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." Luke 9:23. To be a Christian involves complete surrender. Our Lord's parable of the pearl and the merchantman reveals that we must be willing to invest every single thing we have in obtaining that tremendous prize of eternal life. If we allow one thing or one person to come between us and doing the will of Christ, we cannot be done what? We cannot be saved. On the issues of this jewelry, we find their origin not being in the children of God, but actually being in the sons of men. And we find that in Isaiah chapter 3, these things are condemned, the wearing of jewels. But today you will find that men and women are piercing themselves and having decorations on their bodies and more other openings in their bodies which God never intended them to have. If God thought that you needed some much more openings for putting these things, wouldn't he have put natural things on us? But you find that whenever these things are raised, even in a very loving tone, people rise against them. And so we find that these compromises are coming in. Church elders are not speaking anything. The pastors are not speaking anything. And in the very view of glaring Bible passages that condemn jewelry, still someone can pierce their bodies, come to the church of God, and not only sit on the pews, but also given a chance on the pulpit to be able to present as a child of God. And so the real reason some Christians cry and complain about the rules and the strictness is because they have only religion to make miserable. The scope of their Christian experience is based upon a constant struggle to live up to the rules, an effort to keep the law, instead of looking unto Christ, who can be able to take away the love of these things. They focus on these things and they focus on the restrictions until they miss the beauty of Jesus Christ in His holiness and see that their adornment is only a depravity and not something that brings them to their higher calling. Now, certainly there is nothing wrong with obeying the commandments of God any more than there is with the husband obeying the state law to support his wife. But if the demands of the law are the only reason for obeying it, then something is seriously wrong. If our only doing of things is because the Bible prohibits it, and we have no otherwise, then we are the most bearable people on the earth. The Christian life is the most saddest lifestyle that you can ever have. We do things not because they are prohibited. We do things because we love Jesus Christ. We do things because we love our spouses and our children. We don't do things because they are prohibited. And so, a story is given here as we end about doing things out of love instead of doing things out of coercion and restriction. A story is given. A mother of 3 boys was having a terrible struggle trying to enforce the laws of good grooming and cleanliness. Like most little boys, these 3 resisted the rules about washing ears, combing hair, and shining shoes. It was a daily battle which mother won only through the long arm of authority and force. But one day the oldest boy in his early teens walked out of his room looking the model of impeccable neatness. Every hair seemed to be in exactly the right place, and the shoes below the well-turned calf were shining to perfection. The mother almost fainted. Hardly able to suppress her surprise and delight, she wisely decided to wait and watch for the answer to this turn of events. The solution to the puzzle was not long in coming. The very next day, mother learned that a new family had moved down the block, and there was a girl in the family. Perhaps the girl had not seen Johnny, but he had already seen her, and it had profoundly affected him. We will not say that it was love which changed his attitude toward the laws of good grooming, but he definitely wasn't cleaning up from fear of mother's enforcement any longer. And so we find that the absence of the love of Christ in our heart will make us struggle with the things that we have to do, and we only look at them with a negative connotation of do's and don'ts. Whenever we look even at the 10 commandments themselves, we see them as a prohibition rather than a blessing in our life. And so they become so difficult because we are always watching ourselves that we may not displease God, who is always ready to punish us when we go wrong. But if we did things out of love, even the thought of doing it wrong will never be there, because the love of Christ fills our hearts so much that we are filled with wisdom, skill, love, and aspiration to do it to perfection, not because of restriction and looking to God as a tyrant who wants to punish us, but because the love of Christ constrains us. And so this creeping compromise that is coming unto church is not coming in because religion is so hard on the people and it's so hard to implement, but the love of Christ have found no place in the hearts of the many so-called Christians. And so when people are in love, they do not need to be threatened or rules to be laid down to do what they have to do. Only when we love Christ, we are told in Psalms 38 verse 8 and 9, I'll instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I'll guide thee with mine eye. Be ye not as the horse or the mule, which have no understanding, whose mouth must be held in with bit or bridle, lest they come near unto thee. And so many Christians are bit and bridle followers. They respond only to threats and obey because of fear of punishment. God says, I want you to be corrected, but I look from me. Only those who love him supremely and are watching for indications of his pleasure will recognize his loving glance and correction. And so, let us first of all measure the love that God had for us and gave his only begotten Son, and think if we can replicate that love. If we can do that, then all these yokes and chains that we are having will fall off from our bodies without any pain of feeling that we are a peculiar people. In Genesis chapter 35, you find Jacob, for the love of Christ, consecrating his children so that they may go to erect an altar for God. And all these jewelries were put aside. In the book of Judges, you find the same thing happening. And when you go to the book of Exodus 32 and Isaiah chapter 3, you find that God condemns this thing. But these colorful cosmetics and jewelries, which were borrowed from those who hated the Lord and from Jezebel herself, are espoused in church today as if the New Testament is opposed to the Old Covenant. When you Old Testament, and when you ask the people about these things, they say that there is no prohibition of these things in New Testament, as if the Old Testament God is a very different God from the New Testament God. And so may the Lord help us. May the Lord continue drawing us unto himself, and may we come to a point that we shall stand true as still to the faith once delivered to the saints. And these creeping compromises that has been coming to the church will find a people who can stand and be counted upon as those who will stand to who will stand in the gap to correct the inroad of satanic forces that has coming to destroy the church. And so I'll leave you with this, that in Luke chapter 9 verse 23, Jesus says, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." Are we surrendering daily? Are we dying to self daily, that these things that really have been of importance in our previous life also are having eminence in our new life? It is so wrong to find that the things that you loved when you hated Christ are the same things you love when you have come to love Jesus Christ. There can be no sign that really the heart has not been converted when the things that they used to love when they hated Christ are the very same things they love when they come to Christ. Paul in the book of Romans chapter 7 talks about that the things I hated now I love, and the things now I love I hate. And why? Because when he came to Christ, he found that it is all vanity. And so may the good Lord have grace upon us. And as we continue learning about this creeping compromise, there is only one thing we have to do. We have to surrender our hearts. And these things that seem so beautiful in our eyes will fall off. But also, we have to be faithful watchmen in the church. As pastors, as elders, as evangelists, as deacons and deaconesses, we have to be so firm with Bible principles that we will not be able to be threatened with these three things that are threatening the church. One, hurting the feelings and being afraid that people will leave in church if we uphold Christian standard. Two, that people will call us holier than thou if we really preach about these Christian standards. And number four, those who have not embraced the truth, but they are the donors and main contributors of finances to the cause, will take away their finances if we preach about these things. May God help us rise above these three elements that will affect us if we stand for the truth. And so, God be with you, and may He continue leading the church even to come out of Laodicean state, that it may be a bride adorned and ready for the second coming of Jesus Christ. God bless you.